I really believe that it was my transness that had created the problems in our marriage and that led to me being rejected by my spouse. And that it was the transness that made me potentially unlovable. But then something kind of amazing and completely unexpected happened.
Welcome.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Queer Relationships, Queer Joy.
We are here today. We're excited because I always say we're excited, but I just love doing interviews and hearing about other people's stories and their relationships. So I am very excited to get to talk to Charlie Nelson, and we'll do introductions briefly, and we're going to save updates for another episode. We're going to just do some introductions and dive right into this wonderful interview. So I'm Keely C. Helmick. I'm the owner of Connective Therapy Collective. I'm a queer, non-binary white person who is still dealing with an acute injury, but healing slowly, bulging disc, finally starting to get a little relief. And I don't know. I missed something. Look at my bio. I forget. I'm a little scatterbrained today, everyone. Sorry.
Listen to another episode if you want more details on the update. And I am Melissa DeSegura. I am licensed as a marriage and family therapist and a professional clinical counselor and working at Connective Therapy Collective. I am a white person. I'm able-bodied. I am bisexual, polyamorous, and I am gender fluid. I use she and they pronouns. So Charlie, we're so excited to have you. You don't have to do the exact way that we did our introductions, but what would you like the audience to know about you? How do you want to introduce yourself today?
Okay, thank you. I'm Charlie. I'm a queer, white, neurodivergent trans person with chronic illnesses. I'm non-binary, trans masculine, and I use he and they pronouns.
You have it down pat. Awesome.
Yeah, that was professional. Way to go.
It's rare that I'm accused of being professional, but sometimes I can pull it off.
Well, I would love to hear. I know that Cardinal reached out and you had shared some of your story on a Reddit post. And I don't want to jump right into the synopsis of everything, but tell us a little bit about maybe your queer experience, what your journey has been like coming into yourself, and we'll go from there.
Awesome. Okay, so yeah, I'm a chronic Reddit oversharer. So that's how Cardinal came across my story. So I've known that I'm queer since I was about 12. So I can actually remember the exact moment that I realized that I was queer. So I was getting my hair done and the stylist was, and to this day probably still is, one of the most beautiful women I've ever seen. I just couldn't take my eyes off her in the mirror. And then just something clicked in my head and I went, oh yeah, I like girls. So I've been quite proudly and openly queer since my early teen years. So I went through a period of identifying as bi and then lesbian for a little while. And now I describe my sexuality as omnisexual. I guess, but labels are, and as you know, I've heard lots of times in the podcast, they can all mean different things at different times to different people,
Totally.
But that's kind of how I self-describe at the moment. So I knew that I was queer from a very early age, but I didn't realize that I was trans until I was 28. So there was a big gap in realizing that I was trans. And I realized this during the first UK lockdown in the pandemic. I was on the phone to a friend who's also queer, but doesn't really know much about trans identities, issues and experiences, and who'd obviously been listening to and adopting some quite sort of problematic ideas about trans people. So we were having this conversation and we were talking about trans inclusive medical terminology. And she was saying she didn't understand why language needed to change. So I just started to explain why I thought inclusive language was so important in the medical field. And I started to give an example of like a trans man being invited for a cervical smear test and the anxieties and dysphoria they may feel about being referred to or interacted with as a woman, and the worries they may have about being mistreated, which might just lead them to avoid going for their smear altogether and, being at risk of cervical cancer as a result. So I was sort of diving into sort of quite a specific example, not realizing that I was describing my own experiences. And it was only during that conversation that I suddenly found the words, I don't exactly know what my gender is, falling out of my mouth. And I kind of did a double take and went, what the fuck did I, sorry, can I swear?
Yes, you can.
I was like, what the fuck did I just say? And it was only once those words were out of my mouth that I realized, oh fuck, I'm trans. And I didn't know what that meant. But when my spouse came home, I sort of told them what happened and was like, yeah, I think I'm non-binary. And at the time they were quite cool with it, but sort of since then things developed and my marriage had a bit of a breakdown. But we're back on track now after that big revelation during the first lockdown. And things are good now. But as you'll probably find out later as I dig into the story, it took some windy turns to get where we are now.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to recap. So that's your story in a nutshell. And then Melissa has some questions we were gonna before we dive into hearing your relationship story.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Yeah, definitely interested in how this impacted, the relationship. We've talked about that on the podcast before, how our explorations can shift things dramatically sometimes. And I
Yeah.
think your story is a really great example, like you said, of what positive change can come, but also what you need to go through to get there sometimes.
Yeah.
Before that, though, I love that you had the realization moment as you were talking. And I think actually this is a theme that foreshadows a little bit of what you're going to share, this idea that sometimes the things we're really passionate about and have a lot to say about, it's because they're rooted in our own experience, even if we don't know it yet.
And it always feels really obvious looking back and seeing all the signs that I probably should, in inverted commas, have realised that I was trans, going, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense now. But it's only once I was saying the words that I was like, oh, that's just come out of my mouth, and now everything is sort of making sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell us about, start us from that point of sharing with your partner. How did that start to shift the relationship that you had?
Well, at the time that I first said, I think I'm non-binary, I think I'm trans. So my partner at the time identified as a straight, white, cis male. They were really cool and supportive about it at the beginning. And I was kind of a bit shell-shocked, I think, because I'd sort of realized it out of nowhere and it'd come out of my mouth before I'd really processed it.
Yeah.
So they suggested I talk to a therapist and work out what the feelings were and what they meant for me. So I found a really good LGBTQIA plus therapist in my area who was incredible. And with her, I slowly broached the subject of my gender identity and worked out that I'm transmasculine. That was an amazing time for me. Obviously, things are tricky, and realizing you're trans and processing that and figuring out what that means for you is going to have some fraught emotional moments. But I think that as I was having those conversations with my therapist for the first time, I felt I understood the relationship I had with my own body and with my thoughts. I tried to explain it to my therapist in a way that makes sense to me. It may not make sense to anybody else, but I've always had a feeling that I was kind of messy, that my thoughts and my mind sort of spill out the boundaries of my body and my head, kind of like a kid's drawing where they've coloured all outside the lines and it's overspilling and isn't contained properly. And then realizing I'm trans and discussing that with my therapist helped me to pin down what that feeling was, what it meant for me, where it was coming from. So it really felt like a waking up and a coming in, as you say, like figuring out like, oh, this is where those feelings have come from and why stuff isn't fitting right. And then a load of other weird things happened around that realization and that really positive getting in touch with myself. So I have a number of chronic illnesses. Most notably, I've got Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. So that causes chronic pain and fatigue and a range of other symptoms that are unpleasant, and I won't list here because we'll be here all day. But I used to need a walking stick to walk, and I was constantly exhausted. But when I realised and accepted that I am trans, I didn't need to use my walking stick anymore. And I
Wow.
couldn't believe it or make sense of it. I thought, this has got to be psychosomatic. I don't know what's going on here. But in talking to my therapist, she helped me to realise that there's a huge weight in suppressing transness. And there's a real energy sapping hidden labor that I was engaging in. And once I let go of that, my physical and my mental health improved enormously. So realizing that I was trans was incredible for the relationship I had with myself. Things were getting better for me than they'd ever been before. I was healthier mentally, physically. I had a better relationship with myself. I was actually excited for a future in a way that I hadn't been before, a future of maybe medical and social transition and feeling more me. But while I was at the happiest that I'd ever been in myself, my marriage started to fall apart around that. So, as I said, my spouse identified as straight cisgender male, and it was becoming increasingly clear as I was becoming happier and more myself, that although they said supportive things and kind of made the right noises, they weren't really on board with my transition. And that was obviously difficult. And at that time, we'd been together for about 12 years and married for 3 of those years.
Yeah.
And I think I'd got so comfortable and just thought our relationship was really solid.
Oh, I was gonna see if I can ask a clarifying question because I think hearing a little bit more. When you say your spouse at that point was identifying as a straight cis male,
Mhm.
and at that point, before you came out as trans to to him, were you identifying as bisexual at that point? Was that
Yeah,
your identity? Okay, so there was this transitional piece around like sexuality, gender, all these different pieces that he didn't know.
exactly.
He just saw you as a bisexual person.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think since they know, in fact, when they first met me, they thought I was a lesbian. I thought I was a lesbian when we first met. And then I sort of, well, fell in love with them and things were like, maybe I'm not a lesbian. And so I don't know, we'd already established our relationship and got to know each other and fallen in love with me as a bisexual female and them as a straight male. So I think they were really thrown when gender came into it and started to impact on their sexuality and
Uh-huh.
put questions to them about their sexuality and what my gender would mean for their identity.
Yeah.
And that is obviously difficult for anybody with a trans partner, that if you are used to seeing yourself a certain way and your identity is your own and you have the right to define your identity on your terms, but when a relationship with a person, if their gender starts to change or their presentation starts to change, inevitably there's something reflecting back on that person, which was obviously a real struggle for them, completely understandably. And for me, because I'm omnisexual, bisexual, pansexual, the gender of the person I'm in a relationship with would never have mattered to me
Yeah.
personally. It might change how my my romantic attraction, my sexual attraction played out perhaps, but it would never be a barrier to experiencing romantic or sexual attraction to that person.
That's a
So I
good
think I
distinction. Because being able to shift maybe the way it plays out. I like that language you
yeah,
use, but then not meaning the attraction can't be there anymore.
exactly. Yeah. So being with a straight person who for whom that wasn't the same, there was really quite I don't know, not a clash, I suppose, but I guess we just didn't really understand each other's perspective there. We couldn't really see both sides in each other's perspective. So there was, and there's always been, I think, a bit of, looking back now, certainly, there have been some real communication and trust issues generally in our relationship, which we're now aware of and are now working through. But at the time, we weren't truly aware that they were there. And those communication issues sort of butting up against the difference in our sexualities and our gender identities was really sort of swirling together into quite a difficult mess to unpick and to try and figure out what was going on and to try and communicate our needs and our experiences and our emotions around the transition
Yeah.
as clearly and openly as we'd want to. No, I'm very much an oversharer. I just say what I think and what I feel. It does get me into trouble sometimes, but I'm very much open, and I think that's probably connected to my neurodivergence, the fact that I want everybody to be clear, cards on the table, and want to know exactly what's what. Otherwise, I find it really difficult to navigate. But they've always struggled to be honest and open since I've known them. And obviously, these issues that were coming up were really compounding that.
Hey, it's Cardinal, your behind the scenes buddy. Oh, communication. I feel like it comes up in every single episode. Something I haven't talked about in a while is our free relationship check-in worksheet. It has 5 exercises for you to do alone or with someone special. Real good for communication, just facilitates it. So nice. The activities are simple but profound and good for both beginning and established relationships. Download the worksheet by clicking the link in the episode description. All right, back to the show.
Do you mind sharing like a couple what you feel comfortable sharing about when you're saying the issues that come up? I think listeners it'd be helpful to hear like what specifically was going on, like for you, like what you were feeling. Cause I think it was really important how you said, I was at a happy point and then my partner was struggling. So what were some of the specific issues that were coming up?
So we'd talk about the fact that I was much happier, that I was more confident, that there were visible changes in the way I held myself, and I was more confident, and I would joke more and laugh more, and I was expressing joy and confidence much more. And they were saying, I really want you to be happy, but I'm finding it very difficult to see those things. It took a lot for me to get them to admit that actually in conversation, that they were finding it difficult to look at me being happy and to see me feeling confident whilst changing, well, from their perspective, changing into a person that they couldn't be married to and in love with anymore.
At that point, that's what they were questioning. Okay.
Yeah. So that we had a lot of conversations about how our relationship would continue, whether it would continue, how it would continue, whether we'd stay friends and all of that stuff. And it was very hypothetical. It was very difficult for, I think, either of us to really envision what that would really be like. So I think that was part of the problem, was not really having a clear understanding of what our relationship was going to look like, and making plans and committing to a relationship long term. Certainly, I think from their point of view, but this is my perception of it, obviously that's not their experience, they might say something different, but it felt like they were having difficulty committing long term to a relationship if they had no idea down the road whether or not they could be invested in it. And that was kind of going on. Bits of, I mean, I'm talking with a lot of hindsight here, so I know a lot of these things were going on, but at the time I can't really remember how much of it I was aware of and knew was going on. But at the same time, my partner was really closing off and not communicating much. They were drinking pretty heavily. They'd start to have quite a lot of anxiety attacks, and particularly these anxiety attacks happened when I talked about my transition. So it was clear that they didn't want things, or specifically me, to change, despite the fact that I'd been depressed the entire time they'd known me, and knowing that I wasn't happy as I had been. I tried to hold back my transition a lot of ways and find some kind of half measures that would hopefully alleviate some of my dysphoria and help me be me, but without losing my relationship to my spouse. Which was hard because I was compromising myself and my identity, my happiness, in order to try and keep this relationship. And even in having these conversations about, you know, the half measures that might help us sort of reach some middle ground, they still started to pull away. They didn't want me around a lot of the time, and they kept creating distance between me and some of the friends that I'd made through them. So asking me not to come out with them, and growing kind of more secretive and folding in on themselves quite a lot. So all the time they were saying the right things and supporting me verbally and saying they want me to be happy and they think this is great and they want me to find the things that make me happy. But also I was becoming increasingly lonely, and our marriage lacked the intimacy and honesty that we both needed, and it became really quite unequal. So even though the right noises, the right things, the right supportive things that they felt they should say were being said, it wasn't a reflection of what was really going on in our relationship.
So often we hear that from clients too, of like, I want to get on board. It matches my ethics, my values. I care about this person, but I'm having an embodied experience of panic or anxiety or depression. I'm having a response to it that I'm not able to shift right now. But we know it did shift for you. And not to jump ahead, but like, what was the breaking point here? When did things start to change?
So, I mean, I knew things weren't right. I knew that they were being secretive. So I asked them a number of times if there was something they weren't telling me, and those sort of questions were sort of rebuffed or battered away quite a lot. But eventually it came out that they were having an emotional affair with one of our mutual friends. So I tried really hard to be supportive and understanding, because I do believe it's okay to be in love with more than one person. But what it came down to for me was the ethical part of ethical non-monogamy. There wasn't an ethical foundation to what was going on here. So they'd been lying to me. And when I'd asked if there's something going on, they'd completely denied it. And they'd been discussing me and my transition with this person that they were having an emotional affair with. So I just felt betrayed. They felt that although it's, you know, there's nothing wrong with falling in love with this person or developing feelings for this person, the way in which this has panned out was really harmful.
Like you said, that lack of communication.
Yeah, completely. And the honesty. And even when I knew something was wrong, I had a gut instinct and asked. It was that for a number of weeks they denied it, until obviously something broke with them and that they admitted it. So by that point, I'd been spending a few weeks trying to figure out whether or not to stay in the marriage at all anyway, because it's obviously making us both so unhappy. So this was just the final straw for me that made me think, okay, something has to change. So I instigated a separation between us, and I moved into the spare room and started to try and figure out what it was that I should do. And my self-esteem was so low around this point, and I really felt that I was unlovable, and in particular that I couldn't be loved as a trans person. Get a bit emotional.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
but I wanted to be, and I wanted to be loved, and I wanted the intimacy and the connection that our marriage had lacked for quite a long time. So I started dating and meeting people and going out and having dates with people, which I hadn't done in sort of over 13 years. So that was terrifying. But meeting these people really showed me that I could be desirable and I could be lovable and I could be wanted. But I guess still deep down, I really believe that it was my transness that had created the problems in our marriage and that led to me being rejected by my spouse. And that it was the transness that made me potentially unlovable. But then something kind of amazing and completely unexpected happened, which was that obviously we were still living in the same house. I was in the spare room. I was going out to dates. I was telling them where I was going, because you have to tell somebody where you're going when you're meeting a stranger. So my spouse was seeing all this happen for me. And as I've said, they'd always struggle being honest and open and about their feelings in particular. But something, I don't quite know what, but something about what we were going through finally kind of unlocked something for them. And then one evening, they just came to me and told me they were starting to experience sexual attraction to men, sort of out of nowhere. We talked a lot about those feelings and how they felt about this. And we uncovered a huge amount of anger and a lot of fear and a lot of internalized homophobia, meaning that they'd been repressing this for years and years. But something about what was going on, the sort of the kind of the blow up in our marriage and our lives had caused us to bubble to the surface.
Yeah.
So that they'd kind of, because of my transition, they'd had to look at the idea of being perceived as a queer person in a queer relationship because I was trans. So all of a sudden that was front and center and they couldn't look away anymore. So their first response had been to really try to reject that queerness out of the fear and to reject me and my masculinity and to do all those things in order to stay in the closet and stay safe. We really both believe that they've been trapped in this sort of toxic masculine expectation of the straight cis guy, and that was a real barrier for them. But once they opened up and we started talking, they just seemed to kind of break free of it from that first, I think I'm starting to have sexual feelings for men, to they kind of just blasted through it. It was amazing. It's like a dam bursting. Once it opens, it's not gradual anymore. Suddenly it just flows out.
It does.
Yeah, it's just like, and it's out there now. And I felt so honored that I got to see them kind of wake up in this way. And as we said before, we talk on the podcast about coming in rather than coming out. And that's exactly what this was. They were coming in and meeting themselves properly, coming home to who they had been all the time, but had been so scared to admit that they were willing to blow up their whole marriage to avoid admitting it and looking at it and feeling those feelings. That was pretty incredible.
Amazing.
And was a real honor to witness as a partner of, and because I've known that I was queer since I was a child, basically. It was really eye-opening for me to see somebody coming into themselves as an adult and seeing what that looked like and what they were experiencing and being able to talk to them about it. And our queer experience has been so different from each other's. It's made us both so much more sensitive to the wide variety of queer experiences and what queer identity and discovery looks like for different people, even people who've grown up together and been together since they were teenagers, as we have. So that was incredible. And it made a lot of sense with how they'd been pushing back against my masculinity and hiding away and creating that distance, because being too close, that proximity to my transition meant that was being dragged out of them where they probably weren't ready and they were terrified to look at it.
Yeah.
But then it got even more weird and wonderful. So once they'd embraced their queerness in terms of their sexuality, I think that freed them up to explore what that meant for their gender as well. So they start to play a bit with their gender expression, with their pronouns, and they came out to me as non-binary as well. I don't know how to describe how completely that floored me. So we went from them questioning whether they could stay in a marriage with a trans person to being like, oh wait, I'm queer and trans too. And
Yeah.
I was like, wait,
The
what?
climax of the story.
Yeah,
Quite the
it's like
evolution.
relationship whiplash. I was like, what's happening?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'd been believing my transness was a problem, that it caused all this distance between us and the anxiety that they were experiencing. But actually, all these anxiety attacks, the drinking, these weren't because of me transitioning, but because
Yeah.
of that proximity to my transition was forcing them to finally come out or come into themselves. And they were terrified, understandably terrified. So all of the dishonesty over the years wasn't rooted in problems with me and our communication necessarily. Of course, it impacted on our communication, and we're working through that now. But it was rooted in this repression, this unhappiness, and this living in the closet.
Yeah.
So one of the most valuable things that I've come to understand through this quite bizarre experience is that it was never about me. I
Yeah.
was always good enough. I don't need to try and hold back parts of myself, my transition for anybody. And I've been able to find so much more confidence and joy in my transition than I thought possible. But alongside that, I feel like I've been gifted with this absolute privilege of being able to watch another trans person find their queer trans joy alongside me, but in a different way.
Yeah.
And it's been nothing short of sort of magical. And it came from marriage utterly collapsing in on itself and
Yeah.
feeling like, oh, I'm unlovable because I'm trans and our marriage is now ruined. And we've been together since I was 18, they were 19. And it just
Yeah.
felt like we were having to start from square one and everything was trash to, oh no, this is accidental T for T love that we didn't realize we found. And that's
Something in you
super,
knew before
yeah.
you consciously knew what was happening.
This is interesting because yeah, this is something that makes me laugh is that when we first met, I didn't think I was into guys at all, and they presented and identified as cis male back then. But something about them just caught me, and I remember saying to a friend, I find that person weirdly attractive, weirdly because I was like, but that's a guy that doesn't make any sense. I'm a lesbian. But then obviously our relationship blossomed, and I was like, maybe I'm not a lesbian. Maybe I am into guys. But now they've come out as non-binary, I'm like, oh no, that makes sense. Maybe I'm not into guys. And it's just come full circle. And I just saw something in them. So we just sort of fell into this accidental T for T love, but it just took us 12 or 13 years to realise that that's what it was.
Incredible. You all did it. I'm curious, what kind of supports did you have throughout this whole process, or did you wish you had? What kind of community, and maybe even what do you have now in terms of continuing to support both of you in your individual journeys, but then your marriage and your journey together?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I was having individual sort of counselling therapy at that time, which they suggested when I first said, oh, I think I'm non-binary. And that was really good. And I'm really, really pleased that that suggestion came from my partner as well, that they were encouraging me to go and seek that support. And I don't know if I would have done without their encouragement to do that. And they are also seeing a therapist now who's also trans to discuss their transition and to explore that sort of individually. Because I think there was a little bit of a, once we both realized that we were trans and we were figuring out our identities and kind of moving away from what we thought was our cis het marriage into something completely different, there was kind of an instinct or a desire to bring our transitions together somehow, that we were transitioning together, and that's not the case. We're both completely different people with different identities and different journeys, and I think it's really important that we have those separate spaces and separate therapeutic support systems so that we're not trying to transition with each other in an entwined way, but transition alongside each other, supporting each other and recognizing where each other is at, but without trying to connect them or project our experiences onto the other person.
Yeah.
We also have a couples counsellor as well, who's another LGBTQIA plus counsellor, and she's incredible. So we've got space where we can talk in a therapeutic environment about our relationship with the support of a counsellor, as well as having the separate therapies. And I think that's been hugely valuable. It means that we can discussed, because I mean, there are times when we didn't have the couples counselling where I'd be talking about relationship issues with my individual counsellor.
Yeah.
And although that could be very helpful, it meant that I wasn't communicating with them about what was going on with my partner.
Yeah.
So having the two different therapeutic spaces and knowing how to navigate both of those has been hugely valuable. At keeping things separate that should be separate, but also keeping the communication linked together that needs to be linked together. I've also had brilliant support from friends. I don't have very many trans friends, but I've got quite a lot of queer friends, and talking to my queer friends about it. And I came out to one of my friends during the lockdown on a socially distanced walk in the countryside, and she was hugely supportive about it. And then she asked me to be part of her wedding, and she changed all the language to make it really trans inclusive and really made me feel really welcome and respected and listened to, which was great. And I just know that I can talk to her about anything and there's never any judgment. But I think most importantly, something that we've had, the support that we've had between us, a relationship that's been really valuable, has been my brother-in-law. So my partner's youngest brother. So he's also queer. He came out to me when he was 13 and came out to me before he came out to the rest of his family. We've got a really, really close bond. He's my best friend. And obviously he's my partner's brother, so they're very close as well when they're not play fighting. And they're big as well, so it's very dangerous. You've got to try and get out the way before you lose a limb. He's been incredible. Because he loves us both so much. He's remained really neutral, but has been there to talk to us both and all three of us together. And we go out, the three of us together, and we talk about anything and everything. And having a family member who gets it and isn't just on one or the other side of the family, because he's my best friend as well as being my partner's brother, has given us both such a strong sense of family support that's made it so much easier to feel connected to family and to come out to the family. And I know not everybody has that. It can be very difficult being a queer person if your family is not supportive. And it doesn't mean my entire family is supportive, of course, but to have a real core nucleus of family who is supportive has been amazing. And I don't know what we'd do without him.
Yeah. Beautiful.
That's so lovely.
We're all planning to buy a house together now, actually. We've decided that we want to have a big queer space. We decided that, you know, it's part of the monogamous relationship escalator that you get married and you buy a house and you move in together and it's just the two of you. And we decided that we don't like that we want a big sprawling house of queer people and queer community. So we're planning on buying a big house together and just filling it with queer people. That's a pipe dream for when we have lots more money, but it's made us realize how much we, all three of us, value having a wider queer community around us, but also creating queer family in a queer home. So that's future plans for when we're rich and can afford a big house. But until
amazing. Love that.
Well, on that note, it was such a lovely, happy ending, a super queer, happy ending.
Yeah.
And well, I want to make sure before we get to Queer Joy, is there any last thing that you want to say before we jump to Queer Joy about your journey, your story with your spouse and all your loved ones?
I guess that I know for a lot of people things wouldn't turn out this way. For a lot of people, ending marriage would have been the right thing to do. I know that it's probably relatively rare that you realize your partner who's pulling away from you because you're trans is actually trans themselves. That's where it's all coming from. So for us, me figuring out that I'm trans was kind of the catalyst for us both finding queer joy together, and things have turned out way more weird and wonderful than I could have predicted, but in the most wonderful way possible. But I just know that that's not going to be right for everybody, and finding your queer joy and your queer love, or your T for T love as we have, is going to be rocky. Probably it certainly was for us. I don't expect that everybody's relationship would turn out in quite the same way that ours did, but it does turn all right in the end. I guess, no matter what that looks like for the individual, but yeah, you can find it.
Thank you so much for sharing your story.
How lovely.
Welcome. I enjoyed telling it and rambling on.
Well, we love hearing it, all the queer joy. So on that note, who wants to start Queer Joy of the Week? Yes, you have a Queer Joy of the Week. Yes.
I do have a queer joy. So my sister's friend from school, she's the absolute favorite of my sister's friends. She's lovely. She and her wife now got married this week. They had a really difficult journey to getting married. It kept having to be put off because they've had a really tough few years of it with close family bereavement and serious illness in the family. But then I think the day before yesterday, my sister sent me a video of them getting married in a chapel in Las Vegas by an Elvis impersonator. After it taking a few years to get there and things being really, really difficult for them, having a really rough time. So it was just gorgeous to see them finally becoming wives and get to the place that they've been planning to get to for so long. It was gorgeous.
Amazing.
Hey, so beautiful. Melissa, what's your queer joy of the week?
Well, okay, this one comes with a little disclaimer. I wasn't sure if I was going to share this one, but it was so sweet and special that I want to give it some airtime. But I will say, if you are one of my partners who did not recently give me a gift or a metamor who does not want to hear about this gift, this is the time to stop listening to this episode. You know, being polyamorous, there's various degrees of outness that myself, my partners, my metamors are, which really means I don't get to share a whole lot. So sometimes when I receive really meaningful things, I can't post it on social media. You know, I can't share it with people. So this is my moment to do that. But if any of you know the game Wordle, it's an app. It's very addictive, in my
I love
opinion.
Wordle.
Yeah, I introduced one of my partners to this game. We've actually also been playing like words with friends. Totally kick his ass every time. I'm really proud of that. Anyway, we had bonded over this and just kind of a silly little thing, but he came to one of our dates and brings me a hand carved Wordle board that he has made and like purchased all these extra Scrabble letters so we can literally play the game, but like the two of us instead of being on the phone, like play it together when we're on a date. And it's just like, I don't know, you hand carve something for me, and he's very crafty. He's an artist, but like, damn.
Yeah.
I love
Me
that.
speechless. And it's just such a sweet, meaningful gesture. And like I said, I don't get to share that a lot of places. So that's one of the things that has brought me some good queer joy in the last couple weeks.
Nice. Well, I have multiple queer joys, but I will save one of them for another episode. But yesterday I went to the Thorns game, and Thorns games are always queer. But the queer joy was actually for me, I kept seeing all these younger kids, like age 12 and under, with like the rainbow. I don't know what they call the things, that they're like scarves, but they're rainbow for Thorns. For those who don't know, Portland Thorns is the women's soccer team, which, by the way, we need to yeah, we're
We
always
need to talk about that.
yeah. Yeah, they're not all women, by the way. But anyway, that's another episode or another discussion. But it was so cute to see all these kids, you know, these young folks with the rainbow, and just like, it's just so queer. And we won the semifinals with an awesome kick with like 2 minutes or awesome goal with 2 minutes to go. It was just so fun and fantastic. And having that kind of exuberant sports energy with so many queer people, it's just amazing. It's just it's exhilarating. And I know I probably said this before, but I always say it's like, especially because being 42 when I was growing up, there was just not access to that. That just wasn't there. And so I just get this elated, I don't want to say elder, but older queer. Some of the young folks that listen or our clients at CCC would definitely call me an elder. I'm not claiming that yet, but it is an extra layer of joy. And also, we'll see if it comes out, and maybe Cardinal will edit this if it doesn't happen. But he, as queer as this is, super queer, me and my ex, who are now friends, got spotted by the Portland Tribune person, and they came and took a picture and interviewed us. Like,
Oh my God.
started to us. I'm like, it's because we were so queer coded, I'm sure. So we're in the newspaper, but I had predicted, I had confidence Thorns were not supposed to win. And I had confidence that we were going to win, and we fucking won. So
Way to go.
yeah. So Cardinal can edit that if we don't actually get in the Tribune, but we'll see. So anything before we sign off, Charlie, that you want to add if people have questions or want to chat with you?
Oh, I hadn't thought of that. I don't know if we can link to the post on Reddit if people want to like read that and can
Until I do
get in
that.
touch with me that way if they want to chat.
Totally.
Otherwise, just thank you very much for having me on, and I hope I've spoken coherently in a way that people can relate to and can gain some hope of finding trans joy in the least expected places, perhaps.
Yes, thank you. And y'all know how to get a hold of us. If you want to contact us, we have our, again, still a new-ish Instagram page for Queer Relationships, Queer Joy. You can contact us at CTC through our website, our Instagram, our Facebook. And again, thank you so much for joining us. And I hope all of you have a queer and joyful week.
Thanks for listening to Queer Relationships, Queer Joy, a podcast by the Connective Therapy Collective, hosted by Keely C. Helmick and Melissa DeSeguirant, with audio edited by Lei Supapo Bernito. I'm your producer, Cardinal Marking. Intro music is by Bad Snacks. This week's guest was Charlie. If this episode made you smile or think, tell us about it. If you hated it, tell us about that. Review us on iTunes or Spotify. Or send us an email at media@connectivetherapycollective.com. For more queer joy, visit our website at www.connectivetherapycollective.com. Love ya. Bye.